Thanks for tuning into Mirror Now. You're watching The Big Story with me, Avni Raja. First up, a quick look at the headlines. While hearing the Centre's review petition on SC/ST Act, the Apex Court said that there will be no immediate stay on the Supreme Court order. Matter will be heard next in 10 days. Big relief for CBSE students. No maths re-examination for Class 10 students of Delhi NCR. HRD Secretary says decision in interest of the students. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister lead AIADMK's day-long hunger strike, demand setting up of the Kaveri Water Management Board. After PMO's intervention, circular regulating fake news stands withdrawn. Decision on what constitutes fake news to be taken by press bodies like National Broadcasting Association and Press Council of India. Administrator for popular Facebook page arrested for posting explosive comments against Telangana state government. Move triggers massive outcry. Opposition calls it an attempt to throttle freedom of expression. Right, straight up to the big story that we are tracking today. Now, a day after massive protests were held against the Supreme Court order on the SC/ST Atrocities Act, the top court today heard the review petition filed by the government. The court has not given any immediate stay, but it clarified that the intention was to protect the innocent. The government submitted that the Supreme Court order dated March 20th weakens the overall act itself. Now, the Apex Court will hear the case further in 10 days. That was the big story that we've been tracking all of today. Remember the massive protests that we saw yesterday from the entire Dalit community over against the Supreme Court order as far as the SC/ST Act is concerned. The contention essentially was that the SC/ST Act gets diluted with the March 20th order of the Supreme Court. Congress, in fact, criticized the government, questioning the delay in filing the review petition.
विरोधी डीएनए अब उजागर हो गया है। देश के कानून मंत्री ही झूठ बोलेंगे कि वो SC/ST प्रिवेंशन ऑफ एट्रोसिटीज एक्ट कानून के मामले में सुप्रीम कोर्ट में पार्टी नहीं थे। इससे बड़ी झूठ क्या हो सकती है। सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बाकायदा 20 तारीख को उनको नोटिस दिया और कहा कि अटॉर्नी जनरल ऑफ इंडिया को भेजा जाए। ना अटॉर्नी जनरल को भेजा, ना सॉलिसिटर जनरल को भेजा, एक एडिशनल सॉलिसिटर जनरल को भेज दिया और वहां जाकर दलील क्या दी कि जो SC/ST कानून में दोषी हैं उनको जमानत दी जानी चाहिए। SC/ST कानून में अगर केस गलत पकड़ा जाए तो फिर दलित और आदिवासियों को सजा होनी चाहिए। 19 मार्च 2015 का सर्कुलर सुप्रीम कोर्ट में दिया, वहां शपथ पत्र दायर किया। इधर कानून मंत्री झूठ बोल रहे हैं और 20 तारीख को यह फैसला आया, 20 मार्च 2018 को। 2 अप्रैल 2018 तक रिव्यू क्यों नहीं दायर किया गया?
We were expecting, but still I hope that if they refer it to the larger bench, the decision, then it will come. Otherwise, the government should go for amendment, and amendment will solve every problem.
All right, let's go across to my colleague Meenakshi Bhanja, who's joining us on the phone line. Meenakshi, before we get to some of the other important aspects, if you can first take us through what are the key observations as far as the Supreme Court made on its own judgment of March 20th.
Well, Avni, at the outset, it's very important to understand what has transpired today. We have heard from the Supreme Court bench about the real intention, the real motive behind its original order of 20th March 2018. Thus far, that message was missing. We had heard from everyone around us, Avni, from the stakeholders to the protesters to the agitators to even the government of India, but clearly not from the Supreme Court bench. And that is why this observation assumes so much importance, because the top court is telling the citizens, it's telling the common man, somewhere Avni, it is also assuring them, one, to have faith in the Apex Court and to not doubt the judgment of the Supreme Court. In pursuance of that, the Supreme Court has clarified that nowhere in the March 20th, 2018 order was the intention of the court to dilute any of the provisions of the SC/ST Act. It was merely to protect the rights of an innocent person. if at all that person is found to be innocent in the foreseeable future. That apart, the Supreme Court has also clarified it was a mere procedural interpretation of one of the provisions of CRPC pertaining to the arresting powers of police. So nowhere was the idea, the intention of the court to overhaul, to tinker around, or much less to dilute any of the provisions of the SC/ST Act. So this is very critical of me. This is important because perhaps this is the message which really needs to be communicated to everyone across the country so that they have a clearer understanding of the intention of the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, Meenakshi. And as far as the order itself is concerned, if we look at it from an operational perspective on ground for the next 10 days until the next hearing, at least, and then whether or not, depending on what the Supreme Court decides, of course. But meanwhile, the judgment of March 20th will hold. That is also a key clarification to make.
देखिए, हिंसा हुई है, मौतें हुई हैं, इसका कोई दोषी वो लोग हैं जिनको आज पूरे देश के दलितों ने जिनको नकार दिया है, चाहे वो बीएसपी के लोग हैं, चाहे वो कांग्रेस के लोग हों। कल जिस तरह कांग्रेस के अध्यक्ष जी का फोन, जिस तरह से ट्विटर पर उन्होंने मैसेज डाला, जिस तरह उनके लोग इन्वॉल्व हुए, ये राहुल जी से मैं पूछना चाहता हूं कि आज बीजेपी 4 साल से है, लेकिन 50 साल से वो सत्ता में थी। आखिर में दलित आज दलित बना हुआ है, आखिर में स्थिति निर्माण हुई, इसका जिम्मेदार कौन है?
All right, well, that was Ramshankar Kathera, the chairman of the SC/ST Commission, and those are the details as far as, like Meenakshi was pointing out, what exactly the Supreme Court observed on its own judgment of March 20th. Also important to point out here that the fact that the Supreme Court agreed to rehear its own judgment is also important to note, because that is something that is also quite rare. These are the latest details that are coming in as far as this entire issue is concerned. Now, in 10 days, the Supreme Court will once again hear this issue after taking into account responses from other stakeholders as well. And that was one of the arguments given by a lot of people, that the Supreme Court hasn't heard from all the stakeholders before coming up with the March 20th judgment. So that is something that will perhaps no longer hold now, because the Supreme Court is going to hear from various stakeholders as far as this issue is concerned. So at this point, the court has not given any immediate stay, but it did clarify also that the intention was to protect the innocent. That was the intention. That was those are the nuances of the March 20th judgment that perhaps did not get was not understood by a lot of people before really protesting. The government submitted that the Supreme Court order. The government, on the other hand, has said that the Supreme Court order dated March 20th actually weakens the overall act. And that is the reason they filed for a review, asking the Supreme Court to relook at its March 20th judgment. So in the interim 10 days period, like we were pointing out as well, the March 20th judgment will stand, and that will again be looked at only when the Supreme Court next hears this entire issue, which is 10 days later. So at this point, there's no immediate stay on the top court's order. The Supreme Court says that it's not against the SC/ST Act, and it pointed out that there was no attempt at all, or that its judgment does not in any way dilute the act in any manner, and it is only intended to protect the innocent. But the government's contention was that that particular order in fact weakens the act, and which is why it filed the review petition. Remember, we saw a huge amount of protests breaking out yesterday, and across the country, in fact, we saw the protests breaking out over the Supreme Court judgment. And at this point, we will just have to wait for another 10 days. All right. All right, we've got Sunil Kadam, who's an activist, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Kadam, for joining us. We heard what the Supreme Court had to say today. The fact that the Supreme Court agreed to hear this issue again itself is quite important to note as well. But overall, how do you respond to the observations made by the Supreme Court today?
Sorry?
What is your response? What is your response to what the Supreme Court said today?
I can't comment on Supreme Court, but I can comment on what the government has done. Actually, government was going to file a petition for I think making changes, rather restoration of the act. But it has not sought that way. I mean, they have gone a different way.
In what way, a different way?
They have not. They have not approached the court for restoration of the act. And what they have said is, we are not interested in restoration, but they just want to have some rectification. That's what the government says.
No, but the government asked, the government had put in a review, requested for a review of the Supreme Court's 20th March order, which is what the Supreme Court did in fact today, and said that it will take into account comments from other stakeholders, and again the hearing will continue after 10 days.
No, but the government, the plea by government is different actually. Now they have changed. What they are saying is, we do not want any restoration of the act, but whatever the changes Supreme Court had made, government had first told us that they're going to go for restoration of the act. But now what they have appealed for is the minor changes. Minor changes. So what are the minor changes? They have not specified that. This is a U-turn by the government.
So what is it that you were expecting from the government in this? And ideally, what would you like the government to do?
From the government is restoration of the original act. Whatever the changes were made by Supreme Court, where we want to annul that, and we plead for restoration of the original act. So, but government has not appealed for that. So this is a duplicity by the government. This behavior is not warranted, not called for from the government. They told us something different, and they're doing something very different in the court. So the government is duping us actually. In fact, I should, if I can use that word. So what we appeal and what we want is the restoration of the original act, and this is not being appealed for. So I condemn the government on this issue then.
All right. Sunil Kadam, stay with us. Let's get in some voices of some of our viewers. Krishna Thakur calls us from Delhi. Hi, Krishna. Thank you for calling us. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. Go ahead.
Hi. Good evening. Good evening. My question is, first of all, I would like to make a comment. Is that if we just analyze this situation with a sane mind and a balanced mind, what court has done is a rationalization of the act. In a non-political environment, this is what court has done, and it has reviewed it today and has made it clear that no innocent should be punished, and this is a natural law, right? But the scene gets complicated when the politicians who are the secular brigade and who are the Dalit leaders, so-called, are trying to take advantage of this and trying to take advantage of the deprived community, and do not allow them to come into the mainstream by just targeting the government for not doing it enough. There are some journalists who just said that it's 1 month that the government has not done anything, while the court passed an order on 20th, and on yesterday on 2nd, the government has further review. The problem is that it is 2019 where the politicians are trying to take advantage of the situation and want that the Dalit community do not vote for the BJP. It is nothing else, but it is in the best interest of the Dalit and best interest of India.
All right. Thank you, Krishna, for calling us with your perspective. S.K. Chauhan from Agra joins us. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
My perception is that this is a conspiracy, not only against the Dalits, but also against the country. They want that the people of the country should come against each other and they start fighting, and an atmosphere of amicability is totally violated and molested. This is their purpose.
All
whatever,
right.
Whatever the Honorable Supreme Court has verdicted, this is quite genuine and this must be done, because this is a democracy. This is not a country, or this is not a jungle in which any law will prevail. The Supreme Court is there to review the law of the country, and they are honorable justices, honorable judges are there, and they have written the verdict after due consultations. So why this hue and cry? This is a conspiracy against the country, which the real intelligentsia of the country will not accept at any cost. This is my perception.
All right. Thank you very much, S.K. Chauhan, for joining us with your perspective on this entire issue. I'm going to go back to Sunil Kadam if he is still with us. Mr. Kadam, do you think that the people have understood, citizens have really understood the nuances of the Supreme Court judgment, what the Supreme Court is actually trying to convey in its March 20th judgment with respect to the fact that it is only trying to protect innocence?
No. See, let me tell you. There are many laws. There are many laws which are misused. It's not that only this Atrocity Act is this law is misused. So you'll have to cancel all the laws then. You'll have to cancel 498. You'll have to cancel 420. There are many laws which are misused. So this is a very lame excuse for whatever changes they have made. The Supreme Court has made. First thing, it's a question of implementation. Let me tell you, it's not a fault of the act. The way it is implemented, the officer on the duty, the people there at the place, these police officers and this police personnel, they are actually responsible for misusing this act. The second thing, there are people from upper caste what they do is they use people from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe to take advantage of the act. Again,
so Sunil Kadam, you're essentially agreeing that there is a loophole, there are ways, like you said, other acts as well. It's not just restricted to this, but there are ways that this act can be misused.
It's only at the end of the police officer and not at the end of the act. There are no loopholes. Actually, people try to misuse by using the SC/ST people. SC people by wrongly accusing the people. That may be the case. It is very rarely done. But let me tell you, on the other hand, if there are people, SC/ST, there are genuine cases, and they go and they go to the police officers. Actually, the thing is that the case is not registered. Let me tell you, 50% of the cases are not registered because of the fear. I mean, SC/STs, they have no audacity to go against the higher-ups in the villages. The goons of the villages, the gundas of the villages, they are so powerful. SC/ST people, they don't dare to go even to lodge a complaint, let alone misusing of the law.
All right, Sunil Kadam. I'm also being joined by Gaurav Bhatia of the BJP on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhatia, for joining us. Do you think, my first question to you is, do you think that the communication has been enough and in a proper manner to explain, to understand really what the nuances of the Supreme Court judgment really are, the 20th March judgment? Has that been understood across the board?
No, first of all, I think it is very important to, show the commitment towards the Dalit community. And the BJP government has stood for the rights of the Dalit, and we have always categorically said that dilution of the act is not justified, and therefore you would appreciate that within 6 working days from the delivery of the judgment, a review petition has been filed. We are a country that believes in rule of law. The Supreme Court is now seized with the matter. The government is being represented by the highest law officer, the Attorney General for India, and we are quite hopeful that considering how the atrocities are committed against the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, the Supreme Court would look into the review petition that has been filed by the government.
So even, Gaurav Bhatia, even after the Supreme Court today made its observations, once again reiterating the real intent behind what the March 20th judgment really stood for and really had in mind with that judgment, you still believe that this particular judgment dilutes the SC/ST Act?
See, I would, with utmost respect to the Honorable Supreme Court, being an advocate, we have very high regard for the Honorable Supreme Court. We need to understand that under the Constitution there is separation of power. The Supreme Court interprets the Constitution and the legislators, whatever acts they legislate upon. But ultimately, this is a case of judicial overreach also, because not only that this SC Act has been diluted, but also a procedure has been introduced which is not there in the Act itself. So there is a legal argument that has been made before the Honorable Supreme Court, and we should wait for the final outcome. But the real sad part is the political parties that have never cared for the rights of the SC and ST, especially the Congress and the BSP, are now trying to politicize the issue. And this also shows that they have very scant respect for the rule of law that prevails in a vibrant democracy like ours. And why do I say that? Because Mr. B.R. Ambedkar, the icon for the Dalit community and for every Indian, was disrespected and humiliated by the same Congress. He was never conferred the Bharat Ratna for good 44 years till the Janata Party Sarkar came, and then they conferred the highest civilian award on him. So the question is, where was the Congress if they were so worried about the Dalit rights? Where was BSP? Mayawati was seen wearing a 5 crore garland. Does that empower the Dalits on the ground?
Gaurav Bhatia, my other question to you is, do you think we could have avoided the violence that we saw yesterday? It could have perhaps been more in control, the entire protest, if you had made your stand clear that you are in fact going to file a review petition right in the beginning?
See, I would like to say two things on that. First of all, the Dalit community is a community which believes in the Constitution. They, in spite of the fact that atrocities have been committed against them, they have been very patient. But it is the political parties which have been provoking the community. And why do I say that? Your question is, if the BJP would have made its stand clear, immediately after the judgment, it takes some time to, read the judgment and to form an opinion. But the BJP spokespersons had come out and they had said that the government is looking into the fact whether, a review has to be filed and how quickly we can file it. Second, the Honorable Law Minister, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, even before the Bandh had tweeted one day prior that tomorrow a review petition would be filed. But in spite of this assurance, the political parties, just for their petty politics, went ahead and started provoking various sections of the community, which I think is being very irresponsible, and this should not have happened.
Right. I can't argue about the way this entire issue is, of course, being politicized. But, coming back to a slightly more broader question as well here, if you look at the number of Dalit atrocities against Dalit that have been happening over the last few years, it has only been increasing. Despite the act, we've seen the number of atrocities on the rise. How would you like to comment to that?
I think, first of all, we need to understand that it was the BJP government under Narendra Modi ji's leadership that brought a very stringent amendment to the SC/ST Act. And I think a hallmark feature of the amendment is that within 60 days, the investigating officer under the Act is obligated to file a charge sheet. Earlier, we saw that governments hardly ever cared about the SC community, and investigation went on for years. And there are other provisions also where more than 100 new offences have been created under the amendment, so that if any SC/ST member is humiliated or insulted, or a lady is insulted, then that has become an offense. And therefore, we are empowering Dalits. And no other earlier government had ever cared for the scheduled caste community. It is the BJP government that has taken these initiatives. There are also schemes like Mudra Yojana, where maximum number of Dalits have benefited. They have been empowered. Stand Up India, again, is a scheme which has empowered the Dalits. And, I would say that honoring B.R. Ambedkar itself has been done by the BJP, because earlier when he was to be conferred Bharat Ratna, the BJP supported it. We brought a Bhim app. It has been named after, Bhim Rao Ambedkar Sahab. This all shows our commitment towards the community and towards the Dalit icons.
So you're saying that the government is doing everything obviously in its power to ensure that the rights of Dalits are not reduced in any way. The act itself is not diluted. What would you like to say to the entire community to ease their fears at this point? Because that is something that we've heard from Prakash Ambedkar as well, who said that the government needs to make some kind of a stand, needs to say something to sort of ease the fears of the entire community.
See, my appeal on behalf of the BJP would be that members of the SC/ST community are our brothers and sisters. And since our icon is Bhim Rao Ambedkar Sahab, he always taught everybody to believe in the Constitution of India, to always abide by rule of law. So if there is a judgment by which, the community is aggrieved and we are aggrieved, then it is ultimately to the Supreme Court, and the right procedure has been followed. The petition is pending. We should have faith in our institutions, and we all join the SC/ST community in their fight for justice, for liberty and equality.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Gaurav Bhatia, for joining us with your perspective on this issue. We've got two callers with us, Captain Jakpal from Rohtak and Thomas from Kerala. Captain Jakpal, first to you. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
Good evening to you.
Good evening.
It is a very simple and plain matter in which the Honorable Supreme Court wanted to safeguard the position of the very straightforward, hard taskmasters who have to take the job out of them. And as one of your panelists agreed, that not only we intimidate, we can be hired to intimidate and file false cases. So the Supreme Court has only safeguarded that too for 7 days, the position of a very honest, straightforward officers. Otherwise, there are people, there are unions who give suparis of the honest officers. And added to this is, if this allegation, it is a very draconian law. Somebody was saying that these high caste Hindus won't let them enter the village. One Dalit is enough to persecute the entire village. So the balance has to be struck, and it has to be driven in their mind that they cannot hold the hard taskmaster, honest, real Hindu, patriot Hindus to a hard task.
Right, all right. Captain Jakpal, thank you so much for calling us. Thomas, go ahead. What is your view?
Yeah, so, madam, actually, so due to this new law, so actually it is a diluted SC/ST Act. So actually, Dalits are not the powerful community, so they are suffering. They are suffering.
Right.
So actually, the Supreme Court is giving the verdict that so are going to protect the innocent people.
All right. Thank you very much, Thomas, for calling us with your perspective. We'll, of course, know what happens, what the Supreme Court really says after 10 days when it again hears this issue after taking into account comments and responses from various stakeholders. Until then, we just have to wait and watch. On that note, that's a wrap on this edition of Big Story. Thank you for watching.